Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is a peculiar entry into the Fromsoftware catalogue of games since Miyazaki took over the development of Demon's Souls. Sekiro moved away from the classical RPG style of gameplay and had a more story-driven narrative. These fundamental changes to this new project drastically changed the gameplay, forcing players to adapt and change with them. Since the RPG element was no longer a factor, players couldn't go away and farm an area for souls and then spend them on stats or weapon upgrades, which would make boss fights quote-unquote easier. This game required you to get good. Pun not intended. But also intended. Meticulous timing was required to parry attacks, to build posture damage, and once again patience was key, opposing the more aggressive playstyle that was implemented in Bloodborne. Some people, reviews, couldn't handle this difficulty, asking for an easy mode. The changes to the game were polarizing. Some disliked the change from the classic Soulsborne gameplay style. It's clear for many reasons why this game would polarize the community. For example, one of the main aspects of Soulsborne games were the variety of weapons which you could use and the different gameplay styles. This meant that each playthrough could be a unique experience using a different weapon, magic, or strategy, giving us these amazing playthroughs. This was no longer the case with Sekiro, since there was only one weapon that was available to the player. And while there are many aspects of this game which I could talk about, such as the beauty of the game world, or the game being more narrative driven compared to the previous Soulsborne games, today I wanted to focus on the spectacular final boss fight, Genichiro and Sword Saint Isshin, not the Shura ending. Spoilers included, obviously. At the beginning of the game, as we make our way to the field of reeds, we see a figure clad in armor, standing gazing at the full moon, awaiting our arrival in anticipation. Genichiro Ashina. With bow slung on his shoulder and a blade on his waist, he begins to converse with our young master. But this isn't a time for words, for we are trying to escape, and so only the blade needs to talk. This inevitable confrontation is characterized by inexperience against overwhelming skill. It is a fight we are always going to lose, even if we win. However, we lose more than just the battle. We also lose our arm and our master, as we lay in the field of reeds, awaiting the inevitable fate of death. Fast forwarding to the final chapter in Sekiro's journey takes us back to the Ashina Reservoir. This journey is a full circle back to where we began as a beat up and worn out shinobi, alone, fervently protecting our master from the enemy that stood before us. Yet at the end of the game, as we make the same walk up the stairs of the secret passage, we see a quite different scene. An empty field with a glare along the walls from the burning building of the Ashina castle. We once again walk into the field of reeds to witness our master wounded at the hands of the same man that stood before us at the start of our journey. But nothing is the same as it was back then. The man, if we can even call him a man, that stands before us has given up his humanity for the sake of protecting the country which is consumed by flames. And his opponent, the man who he cut down so methodically, stands before him having bridged the gap in experience through the trials of his journey and the strength of his foes. Having the fight in the same place as we began the journey of the lone wolf against the same man, Genichiro, exemplifies the progress that we have made and how much has happened between the two events. not only for the individuals on the plane, but also the world around us. It represents the hours we've spent mastering the skills required to take down the various bosses, and the locations that we have visited along the way to make the journey back to the same spot and show truly how inexperienced we were when we first stepped onto this battlefield a time ago. Genichiro, throughout the game, has been a test of progress. When we first faced him, we knew only the basics of combat. Totally mismatched, we succumbed to this overpowering foe. Atop Ashina Castle, we faced him again at a point in the game when we should have become proficient with the core mechanics of the game. That fight truly testing our knowledge of the game's mechanics and acting as a barrier to players who have yet to demonstrate the skill necessary to progress to the next phase of the game. Once again, and finally, Genichiro tests your mastery over the combat mechanics and requires you to demonstrate that mastery at the end of the game. Genichiro, in our final confrontation, doesn't change much mechanically compared to him in the rooftop, except for acquiring the Black Mortal Blade. Him not changing fundamentally acts to demonstrate the mastery of the combat system from when we were on the rooftop to now. Not only does the game test your skills, but it expects you to have mastered them. This is evident in the fact that your healing gourd doesn't replenish after you beat him. You are expected to no-hit this phase of the final fight to give you more resources for the final part. Not being able to defeat Genichiro without taking a hit puts you at a serious disadvantage for your next challenge, Isshin Ashina himself. After having demonstrated your mastery and proficiency of the combat system, you are put to the ultimate test. Genichiro acknowledges his powerlessness, a stark contrast to the position he was in at the beginning of the game. He feels immense shame from failing to defeat us and failing to defend Ashina from the invaders. So much so, he takes the Mortal Blade and commits seppuku, suicide, for the purposes of honor. The combination of the Black Mortal Blade, which has a connection to the underworld, and the rejuvenating waters, Isshin Ashina, who recently was lying dead in Kuro's room, wriggles his way out of Genichiro's body and takes up the task of honoring his grandchild by defeating Sekiro, and after that, ridding Ashina of its invaders. Isshin has been a mentor in both disguise and in plain sight throughout our journey. We learn and master the very sword style he developed. As he stands wielding the immortal blade in his hand, he calmly invites us to battle and proceeds to show his prowess of the sword. The fight proceeds with the exhilarating feeling of blades clashing, as the sound of metal striking reverberates around the arena. It is a duel between men devoted to the sword. Isshin Ashina, a man who has spent his life aggressively learning and improving his skills on the battlefield, developing the Ashina sword style, and Sekiro, the lone wolf who has been engaged in battle since birth. It is the ultimate test of our skills and what we've learned against the very man who developed these techniques. This isn't a fight of animalistic unpredictability or spiritual apparitions, but of a man who stands above all else in a world filled with immortal monks, giant serpents, and headless apes. The title of Sword Saint is no understatement, and yet it doesn't even begin to truly capture the immense skill of Isshin. Throughout the fight, Isshin demonstrates not only his technical abilities with the sword, but also the spear, pistol, his own physical attributes, and in a godly manner control over the lightning. This is truly the ultimate test of our skills. All the countless hours we spent learning and honing our own reactions, spent being forced to get good at the game, all leading up to this moment. Not only is our skill tested, but also our endurance, having to whittle down 3 health bars to finally overcome our foe. At the beginning, Isshin fights with the calm, methodical approach, yet with speed and swiftness. When we show him that we can outmatch him in this field, he switches to a more aggressive style, increasing his speed even further, and with it, his range. Wielding the spear, he lunges at us from one side to the other, rarely giving us a moment to catch our breath to heal and recover. He hunts us down like a predator would, looking at his injured prey, with no remorse or hesitation. For verily, hesitation is defeat. When we overcome this challenge and demonstrate our own prowess of the blade and the Ashina style, Isshin has no malice or regrets. He sits in the position taken by samurai when committing seppuku, as he was unable to restore the honor of his grandchild. This fight was about honor, and it shall end in an honorable way, the way of the samurai. He recognizes that the person he took under his watchful gaze is no longer a student, but has now become the master, and as such is proud to see us become who we are, praising us with his final breath.
Well done, Sekiro. Farewell.
Stay safe and remember to get good.